6:30, I call the meeting to order. First order of business is public comment. If anybody has a public comment to make, please come to the podium, state your name and address, and address your comments to the board and not the audience. And you have 3 minutes. Anybody? No. It's my understanding Mr. Brown would like to make a comment.
I would. As most people in this room know, we had our fair on the weekend, and it went very, very well. We got a break with the weather, right on time at 10 o'clock. We served something like 140 meals and barbecue and so on. And it was very well managed, and I just wanted to thank everybody that worked in the fair and volunteered and did a great job. Thank you very much.
What's that? Next order of business is Eli Brandt from the Boy Scout Eagle Scout Troop. Welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
So I don't really know how this whole format works. It's my first time coming to a board like this before. But basically I'm proposing an Eagle Scout project at Little River Park on the existing trails. I want to convert it to an exercise trail. I want to install a couple stations, basically get the community to use them a little bit more.
Any questions?
A couple of questions that I have. I got your proposal in front of me. Do you know exactly where you're going to be putting these stations and what kind of stations they are?
Yeah, I've been out there. I've walked the trails a couple times. I've seen some locations that are already cleared, and I was going to install a pull-up bar. I was going to install a station for push-ups, a sit-up station, and then an aerobic type station. And then there would be signs at each one of said stations with the instructions of what to do, what it works out, and so on and so forth.
Is there a maintenance plan?
Well, it'll be maintained by the troop over the years.
Do we have that in writing?
Not currently, but I've talked to my scoutmaster, Mr. Hall, and we've had that all squared away.
Yeah. Normally, we go through the procedure, we ask the Recreation Commission to take a look at this first before we receive it. Have you reached out to them?
I did talk to Larry, and he was interested in setting up a meeting with me, but I didn't know the whole order of things, which one would come first. But I've talked briefly with Larry and Mr. Kenberg, and he seems interested in the project.
I also, I'm interested in it. It's not negative. I just want to make sure we do it the right way. I'd like you to also talk to maybe the Conservation Commission as well.
Mm-hmm.
So when you place them in their positions, at least so we have a map so we know where they are, to make sure there's not infringing on some, materials. Bill, are you here? Have you heard about this at all?
Only seeing it on the agenda,
Okay.
but I do have some comments when he's done.
Okay. So I think procedurally, I'm going to recommend, the other 2 members agree that before you do anything, you talk to the Recreation Commission to get a layout type thing. And the Board of Selectmen would like to see at least in mine, I'd like to see where it's going to be with a map or something along that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll take comments from Bill at this point.
What was it?
I'm sorry.
No.
Comment for Mr. Tom.
Yeah, I have some questions for you.
He'll come back.
Bill Lund, Conservation Commission. I just wanted to make Eli aware that roughly half of Little River Park is protected with a conservation easement. And some of the trails on the park are on that easement land. Other parts, I'm sorry, I have photos to share with you. You can pass it on. Other trail sections are in more of the recreational area of the park with the playing fields, and around and above those. And as you have indicated, Mr. Chairman, he should clear this with the Recreation Commission, and then because of the easement involved, he should meet with Conservation Commission to ensure that what he's planning and where he's planning to do it is not inconsistent with the terms of the easement. If there are questions, I'd be glad to try to answer.
Good. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Eli, could you come back up? I believe Mr. Brown has something. he wants to comment.
I have some concerns over the structures that you're going to erect and you know, putting in a pull-up bar or et cetera. Where did the basic design of these come from relative to their inherent strength and how long they last? I assume they're wood, 4x4s.
Yeah, I was planning on using hemlock beams, but I've done research on the internet about construction of pull-up bars, and also I've written up some concise plans, but I'm seeking approval from, well, actually, one of the adult leaders in our troop, Mr. Dollar, is an architect, and he's willing to go over these plans with me to make sure that they are totally structurally sound.
Okay, good, so maybe he would initial them or something, because obviously it places a liability on the town if someone gets, you know, one of them collapses while he's there. So you understand that?
Yeah.
Okay, good, we will need that for sure.
All right.
So,
I just want to point out that there is,
you know better.
You know the rules.
once again, this is for the Boy Scout. Ben Jeans, I live in Lee. Just want to point out that the Tibbetts Field up in Madbury has also a walking trail, and the town, I think their rec department, rec commission, put in the work on stations, so we could always talk to the Madbury rec folks too, in relationship to Carrie's issues around design and maintenance.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Anybody else have anything they want to say? Go ahead.
And Mr. Brandt may already know this, and I'm not sure exactly what your timing is for when you need to start the project, finish the project. Just be aware that because you need to meet with the Rec Commission and you need to meet with the Conservation Commission, and then what I'm understanding is then you have to come back to the Select Board, that can take a lot of time, just because the meetings are regularly scheduled, and you'll need to do this, generally speaking, along with what their scheduled meetings are. So, just so you're aware that this can be time consuming.
So can we ask Mr. Brandt to get permission from the Conservation Commission, permission from the Rec Commission, and come back to us with those permissions, as well as what these particular workstations are and whereabouts they're going to be located? Is that the directive?
And the signature.
And from Mr. Dollar?
I agree. That sounds good.
Okay. Is that what you understand as well?
Mhm.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you for your input.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Item number 4, Steve Bullock, Public Works Manager.
So I'll go with the easiest one first. At the transfer station, we have 2 old compactor cans out back, the square ones. One of them is actually on the old compactor building that is set down below, that was there when Ricky Stevens was running the dump. And I'm looking for permission to try to sell them to get rid of them.
Ricky Stevens?
Huh?
You mean Randy Stevens?
No, Ricky, that's how long that one's been down there.
Really?
Oh, my God.
The NRRA, so they have a newsletter called Scrap Weekly, so I can take pictures of it and they'll market it and try to sell it. I have no idea what they're worth. Started last on the papers.
Yes, he's doing item 4C first.
I want the easiest one
Yeah,
first.
it's coming backwards, I got that. I have no problem.
How big are they again? These are the ones with the tops.
Yeah, so there's one sitting back there that you can see when you drive around out back, it's just got the little square hole in the front and the top, and
Yeah.
I think, from what I've been told, it was supposed to have been sold long ago, and then it never was. And then there's another one you can't see that's down, the old one, that's actually got an ejector piston in it,
Okay.
that I'd like to try to
Okay.
get rid of, because right now they're just sitting there rotting, they're not doing, we're not gonna use them.
So what are these valued at? How much?
No idea what they're worth.
So do we have to put them, no, we can just find somebody to buy them and, okay.
What I have to do is take a bunch of pictures and send them to the NRA, and then they'll
Okay.
market them. I think they'll know what they're actually worth.
Mr. LaCourse, you're okay with this?
I'm fine.
Mr. Rathman, fine? Okay. Sounds like, go ahead.
Okay.
Yep. Well, come on. He screwed me up by going to C. I was all ready for A.
I know, I saw you shuffling papers around.
Move to approve the Public Works Manager's request to sell 2 obsolete cans to the NRRA. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Are you going to A or
Oh, yeah, so
going to B?
I'll go to A now.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, let me see.
Move it.
From now on, Steve only gets one item.
Good luck.
Yeah, right. All right.
All right, so the space over there is limited to the cans that are up top by where the wood chips are that people get and the compost mulch. The one right up against that building is no good, it can't be used, the floor's rotted out of it. And then there's another one that's there that the floor's rotted out of, and they all have holes in them.
Okay.
And plus, we're light on space, so what I wanted to do was buy some used ones that would be new to us. So Peter and I went to S&J Transport, and our preference would be the 40-foot shipping containers, the big heavy metal ones, for the reasons of they're heavy in metal. There's less work to do to them. If we buy the tractor trailer ones, we still have to cut the landing gear off the front of it and then cut the tires and all that stuff off and move them around. The shipping containers, we can stack stuff on top of, so you don't have to shovel the roofs off like you do with a tractor trailer. They're more rugged, so going in and out, they'll last longer. We won't poke holes in them with the forks like they have been with the tractor trailers. And the tractor trailer ones, the roofs get holes in them that if we're supposed to, by NRA standards, keep everything dry. So what I was looking for permission for was to buy 3 of the 40-foot shipping containers from the NRA.
You mean from S&J?
Yes, from S&J, sorry.
I'm sorry, you wanted to buy 3 of the 40-foot shipping?
Yeah, so those are $3,500 a piece.
All right, 10,500.
Yeah, the other ones, they're not allowed on the road anymore, so I'm not sure how long the floors are gonna last in them, where they've been yanked from the road and everything else. The shipping containers should last us a lot longer.
Are these, Steve, on the CIP in terms of being up for replacement?
No.
So that they're not in the CIP at all?
No.
And how much is, do we know how much is left in transfer station?
No, I mean, it's over $100,000, but Mr. Tappan might have.
He's nodding to 100,000, so.
100,000 change.
He's looking for it. I was gonna
Oh, he's looking for it.
say, yes, there's plenty for that.
Okay.
I know they're
just wanna
not in
make sure.
CIP.
All right. Any questions for Steve?
I think
Are we
it's
good?
a good investment.
All right. And we good through 3?
Yes.
All right. I move to approve the expenditure of $10,500 to purchase 3 40-foot shipping containers for $3,500 each from S&J and to expend the funds from the transfer station equipment capital reserve fund. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, and then the biggest, most confusing one of the night, sorted office paper. So, with all the mixed paper fiasco going on, I was doing research, and with us still paying $35 a ton to get rid of mixed paper, after we've taken the wet strength out, we've pretty much added, between the wet strength and the glass change that we had to do so we could still offload the stuff, we're probably adding every 2 weeks another 5 tons into MSW that go into the landfill. So what I would like to do is try to figure out a way to start sorting the mixed paper out more so we're paying less to get rid of it. So for every ton of sorted office paper we sort out, it's $35 less going to them and $144 in revenue we're making. The problem is we don't have a lot of room. Every bin in there is taken. The easiest choice would be to combine the 2 number 2 plastics. So you take the milk jugs and the Tide jugs and combine them and make what they call a Z-bale. And that automatically goes to the price of the lower one, which would be the colored plastic. So last year's numbers, that would reduce the plastic revenue by $3,000. This year's revenues, it wouldn't be near that because the prices dropped so much on everything. So right now, if we did it, we'd lose 10 cents a pound. So it'd go from 15 cents to 5.
So in terms of the office paper, as you term it, would we get some money from that as well?
$144 a ton we'd make.
So in terms of what's the differential?
It depends on how much we actually sort out. If you look at the piles that are there,
Yeah,
I'm thinking we'll sort out a fair amount,
okay.
because there's a lot there. And we don't have to go that way. We can also take those big cardboard boxes, the Gaylords, with the pallets under them, and we could stick them up top, and people could throw it in there. You don't have to bale, you can ship them in those cardboard boxes. The problem is they're not easy for us to get, and if we ship them, they're not gonna come with empty ones
Yeah.
for us. Or we could try to dump them on the floor after we fill them and figure out how much a bale is and do it that way.
Well, you certainly don't want to get into where your people are manually picking out sheets of paper.
Well, I wouldn't figure we would, because it's not like if they miss sorted office paper into the current mixed paper, when we sort it out, we get in trouble. It can go in it. It's just for every little bit we take out, it's less tonnage we're paying to get rid of and more that we're making money on.
I think the thing that concerns me is how do you get this information out to people? Because you and I already had a conversation about the confusion in terms of the current thing, the last change that we made, so. But if they throw in the office paper into this, where it is now, there's no real difference.
No, it's just costing us a little bit more, but if for every little bit we take out, it's saving us the 35 and making us some money.
So maybe if that's the way we decide, we can have some kind of,
I figure I'd make a big foam board display type thing.
we'll
and
send
stuff
something on
like
the
that.
e-crier,
Yeah,
but also in terms of your people, make sure that,
They all know.
oh yeah, did you know you could,
yeah.
yeah.
I
I
guess
just-
I would recommend trying to do the education campaign before you implement it,
Mhm.
rather than at the same time.
Because it's more than just the paper, you know, all of a
Right,
sudden they're
yeah,
gonna go there to throw their milk jugs where they've been throwing them, and they're gonna be throwing them someplace else now. That's if we do it that way. We can try doing them in the big cardboard boxes and then dumping them on the floor after.
But one of the bins isn't big enough to split, Steve, so you could put.
You can't get a machine, I mean, I could, so I technically could make
Could be
another
a
bin.
Bobcat width or something.
Yeah, and I technically could, where the MSW currently goes, but if I take a whole nother bin out of that, and for some reason we lose power down there or something, that little itty bitty gap that you're gonna end up making is gonna fill up awfully fast.
Well, I thought we were putting a generator down there at one point.
I
I
don't
thought we were looking into that at some point. Remember that? Thought we were gonna do that.
Not that not with me.
Oh, it's your previous predecessor.
But,
That's a
so
conversation we had.
there is the option to put it there. There is to make another one and then nothing changes with the plastic, but you're really tight
Yeah.
on MSW if we do
I
that.
think it would be the best way to do it, for sure.
Yeah, I don't wanna go with the cardboard stuff, let's go the other way. That's my opinion.
So combine the two plastics,
Combine the two plastics.
and then move one of them down, and then you'll have office
Then you
paper.
have a
and then-
bin.
Yeah.
Exactly. Then
Yeah, and the office paper I was planning on sticking right next
Yeah.
to, that way when people come with their bins, they
They
can
can
just
know, yeah,
go like that.
Yeah,
exactly.
that would be perfect. Yeah.
Alright.
Yeah, I like that.
That's fine.
Okay.
Do I have
Eric.
to ask a question? Do I have to go up there?
Yes,
Yep.
you do.
Well, I guess
Yep.
the question to Steve, and, I mean, you don't have to answer it now, but it seems to me if you, those sections, the upright silo sections are movable, right? So if you shortened up if you shortened up two of the bins, you wouldn't have to make an extra bin. I mean, you could shorten, you've got plenty of room to get in for 3 bins there. So you just shorten them if you gain a bin.
The problem is they flare out wide on the bottom,
Yeah.
and they're already as wide as a skid steer bucket. The only ones that are not are the cardboard, and we need the bigger cardboard one because of how much we get.
That was Eric Suttel from North River Road.
Thank you. No pig for you next year.
I'll just get chicken. How about that? Any other questions for Steve?
No.
We good? Do we need a motion, or can he just,
No.
he's just, this is operational?
It's operational.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Me, you, TCBC representative. So the TCBC has a presentation to the board. So if you'll give us a few minutes. Is Apple TV set up?
I'd like to hear all week.
Ooh.
Uh-oh. There we go. Oh, man, it's dark. Real city.
See if you can stay awake.
So do we.
Hello, I'm Cord Bloomquist from the Town Center Vision Committee. Here are our findings and recommendations as requested by the board. To remind everyone that TCVC has a present charge to do 2 things. Create a 5,300 gross square foot new construction single-story building price, and deliver the same thing for a 5,300 gross square foot new construction 2-story building with a basement and elevator. Whichever layout is chosen, the new municipal office building has to house 3 major functions: the town clerk tax collector, or the TCTC, planning, zoning, and building, or the PZB, and finally, the selectman's office, which I will not
We
turn
don't
into
get
an
an acronym?
acronym. No,
No.
the SO, the SO.
Yeah.
But we've verified that these fit into the size of a 1-story footprint, and we'll present that in a moment. But we had to establish a way for figuring out how to turn those into a 2-story building, to divide those functions between floors and what functions would go on which floor. So here are the rules or requirements we established. We decided not to split any functions between floors, as this would be a step backwards in productivity. We're trying to make all these functions in the new municipal office building more productive. We thought it made sense that since we have 3 functions to split between 2 floors, we would pair the smaller 2, leaving the smallest amount of unassigned space on the other floor. As in, we want to minimize the amount of non-overlap going on. We further thought it only made sense to put the highest traffic functions on the 1st floor. Oh, and I should specify that the TCTC and the PZB are the two smaller functions. The select office is larger. So, consulting with the rules of logic, we determined that the TCTC and the PZB would be paired on the first floor. They are both higher traffic than the selectman's office. So the TCTC and PZB are on the first floor. The selectman's office would be placed on the second floor. That leaves a 445 net square foot unassigned space on that second floor. So as in TCTC plus PZB is 445 square foot larger than the selectman's office. Because the two-story layout has that extra room, by virtues of the functions not being equal in square footage, we wanted to create an equal one-story comparison. To do that, we added 445 net square feet to the one-story design, making both designs equal and leaving both with room to grow. We also estimated the cost of a one-story building with an elevator to further equalize the two layouts, and that would be an elevator going to the basement. So here are those numbers. For a two-story building, we estimate it would cost $1.98 million. A one-story with elevator would cost $2.05 million, and a one-story building without an elevator would be $1.93 million. All three of these options include a full basement. Those numbers don't include site costs, which we're estimating at this stage using numbers from the site estimators previously used. That's at around $500,000. So that includes everything outside of the structures and their immediate surroundings, such as clearing the site, paving, septic, water, etc. So that's what the total cost of the building plus parking, septic, sewage, etc. would cost. And to give you an idea of how the footprint differs, the one-story option uses almost twice as much land as the two-story option. Stands to reason. The land may seem plentiful now that the town has purchased the church property, but it is still a limited resource. Also, building a two-story building follows the state guidelines on low-impact development, and that's significant because the building is in the Aquifer Conservation District. Along with the cost and land use, we also looked at maintenance, energy use, daylighting, massing, interior accessible area, and room for growth, but found the differences between a one-story and two-story building on any of those fronts to be insignificant. The biggest difference between the one-story and two-story options are the footprint and low-impact development. The two-story option has a lower cost than the one-story with elevator and is only $49,000 more than a one-story without an elevator. Along with the advantage of a fully accessible building, that $49,000 buys the town a more efficient and more environmentally responsible use of land, as previously mentioned. We therefore recommend the board move forward with pursuing a two-story option. Before we move on to next steps and grant information, I will pause here to take questions from the board as they discuss and decide.
Thoughts, gentlemen?
I may have to call John Tappan to the lectern as backup. Okay.
Do you have any vision where you would plant such a house?
I could go anywhere on the property. We thought we ought to cross these bridges one at a time.
Okay.
But the building remains the same cost regardless of where you put it. There are some obvious things you don't want to do, like place it right next to current buildings so that you hem in this building's ability to expand or the other building's ability to expand. You don't want to put it into a far-flung corner all the way at the back and have to clear unnecessary amounts of the site. But we'll determine the exact placement once we know what size building we're placing.
In terms of, back to us to say,
I understand.
this is where we think it should be. Because all those things are affected in terms of, if you place it way in back of the lot, you have a bigger driveway, bigger parking lot. So that's something that it's not, we will decide and you will say yes, we'll bring it back, this is what we think, what do you guys think? Gentlemen think. Because I think the next step of this process is very interactive between this group and the board in terms of how to move forward. So.
How much much square foot do we have to work with? Well, I mean, okay, we have a 3,200 and we have a 5,900, but how much do we have to work with?
The section that we bought from the church was a little over 4.5 acres.
Yes.
Yeah, so 4.5 acres. Part of it you can't use because of the cemetery.
I deal with square feet.
At 43,560 square feet per acre.
Yes, so we have a lot.
Plenty of room.
The concern we had is in terms of, it's in the aquifer district, and also we gain a little bit in terms of having the two-story over the one. So, and it's also one of the facets of low-impact development. A smaller footprint impacts the area less than a larger footprint.
It also has the size of the roof that you have to replace.
Yes, and maintain, so.
And the basement, why not a slab?
The cost of the, John can bring up he has the specific cost numbers, but the cost of a basement versus the slab is some of the cheapest square footage the town could possibly buy. Once we're clearing out that land and putting in a slab, the cost differential to a basement is how much, John?
The lowest cost is by far single story on a slab. And builders we've talked to have said, given the building site we have with the ideal soils that are there for building, that we would be crazy if we, and kicking ourselves, or somebody would be kicking us down the road if we built a building without a basement. But if you compare slab on grade with one story with basement and no elevator, the difference is $200,000. And for that, you get all of that basement space. And that's actually not quite apples to apples, because where you have the basement, I've assigned some functions to be in the basement. Utility room, what else? IT is in the basement.
Mechanical room for an elevator.
And we've had some small amount of storage that some department heads have told us could go in the basement. And those things have been put in the basement.
And the following question about the elevator. Do we have any idea, maybe it's Julie, I have to ask that question, the amount of usage that people would use the elevator? How many people come into the selectman's office?
Oh, it feels like a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure it does.
I haven't looked at it. I don't know.
I guess I just posed that question. I know, I don't know what the cost is to maintain an elevator.
Oh, we know that too.
The police chief might know that.
We
How
know
much
that.
cost to run an elevator and maintenance on elevators and everything?
Yeah.
Well, we're paying $70 a month now for the elevator in this building.
Okay.
But John's done
Plus,
some,
let's call it $400 a year to get it inspected and licensed by the state.
John has those numbers, John.
Okay.
Why is there a monthly cost?
I'm not answering questions thrown at me.
You gotta come to the podium, sir.
But I'll let the board know.
If we own the elevator, why is there a monthly cost?
Because we have a service agreement on it in the event something goes wrong with it, which things do.
They come to inspect it.
And there's also
Well, the
inspection.
inspection is separate,
Yes.
so essentially it's just a service agreement, correct?
Yes.
The $70.
The
The other one
$70.
is the inspection.
Have we used it? Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Called peace of
It's
mind.
called insurance. Right.
There you go, peace of mind.
have stairs.
John, do you have the numbers for the elevator we're thinking about in terms of the structure?
The elevator costs are different for the one-story versus the two-story. The two-story, both of these are hydraulic elevators. I talked to the company that's providing the service for the elevator in this building, and talked to the department that, or head of the department that does installations, and I got prices on 8 different variants of elevators, from 2 different car sizes with different capacities. The smallest is the same size as the car or cab that's in this building. And then an upgrade to that to a 3,500-pound car, which is large enough for a stretcher laid flat to fit diagonally inside the elevator. By code, that's not a requirement for the size building that we're talking about, the number of floors, but it's something that you might want to consider, and we put that into the price. I was surprised, going from the smaller cab to the larger cab was only an increase of $5,000. And then we also got prices on, the 2-stage does add $15,000, so the elevator in the 2-story building is more expensive. And then we also got prices on machine roomless versus having machine room. There's a difference in upfront cost. The machine room costs less than the machine roomless design upfront. And then maintenance on the machine roomless also costs more because all of the parts that are in there are packed in 8.5 inches of wall. And so they're more difficult to work on, they take more time, and all the parts that are in there are proprietary. If it was made by ThyssenKrupp, every piece in there comes from ThyssenKrupp, Otis or whoever. And so the prices, installed costs for the elevator range from $90,000 to $125,000. And what we've priced in here is the higher capacity, larger size cab, which will fit the stretcher, but not the machine roomless, because machine space in the basement is inexpensive.
Yeah, the other thing to note is not having an elevator to access the basement means that you're restricted in what you can use the basement to do. And by law, we have to be ADA accessible. This isn't like building a private home or some other sort of building.
Any other questions for the committee?
Actually, I was gonna ask Julie a question. Any issue with you on the second floor?
I mean, it's not really an issue for us. I have no idea how the public would feel about it, but.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get to at this point. In the first place, I was thought was, it's a nice recommendation. The idea of a 2-story one's less taking up space and everything else. The elevator's a necessity, I understand that at this point. Well, planning and zoning is on the first floor, TC. I mean, it seems like it's reasonable for that to happen. Selectman's office is a little bit quieter anyways. There's an opportunity for quieting at that point.
I get more quiet if people like to come and sit on the floor.
Yeah. But I don't know how the public feels at this point, but at the same time, well, I can't say much because police office is on the first floor, right? And command office for the fire is on the first floor as well, right? Yeah.
Any other questions?
Just, I'm not sure how the public would feel. The access to the second floor, what we've built into the size of the building is that there's a stairway like the same size as the stairway in this building for the public to get to the second floor from the lobby. The elevator is from the lobby to the second floor. And in addition, in the staff side of the building, there's a second stairway for the staff to go from first floor to second floor without having to go out to the lobby and use that stairway.
And you also said that there would be some, well, you talked about this extra space in the second floor. Is that conference room or is that independent of a conference room?
That's in addition to the conference room, and that 445 square feet comes about just because of that when you add up TCTC plus PZB, that adds up to more space required than.
Put those two together.
Correct.
Right.
We have had someone at one of our meetings did ask Now that we've moved another year down the road, have we gone back to look at, are we still planning adequately for future growth? And in the two-story building, that just happens automatically. The prices that I've put in are actually just accounting for that room, that 445 square feet, as if it was just one large room. It's big enough that it could be three offices. It could be an office and a very large conference room. I've priced it as if it was just one large finished room. That's about just a little bit less than half the size of this room.
I'm sure you have, but could you talk a little bit about the operating maintenance costs of a two-story versus a one-story? Heating, air conditioning, et cetera, et cetera.
We looked at those in the general ways to the extent that I could. For energy use, I did a calculation of conductive heat loss with what we expected to be used for insulation values in the walls, the ceiling, the floor. And for that, the two-story came out to about a 3 to 7% lower heat loss through conduction. But countering that is a two-story, you get a higher stack effect. So it tend to increase infiltration. So our conclusion with what limited amount we know right now is that it was a wash. We looked at maintenance. With a one-story, it's easier to access the exterior walls and windows. But with a two-story, you've got a smaller roof to replace. And so that's less expensive.
But are we not also running larger air conditioning units in a two-story than a one-story, et cetera, heating, so on?
Well, that was part of what I was just addressing with stack effect and the conduction loss. You actually have, when you go to the two-story, because you cut the roof area or attic area, take 40% off of that. You took 40% off the basement area, but you have slightly increased the exterior wall area.
Okay.
We also looked at, with the smaller building where it's a 40% smaller footprint, that's desirable from low impact development standpoint because you have a smaller impervious surface. It also means that the green infrastructure that you need to handle runoff from the roof would be smaller because you're collecting it over a smaller area. If you were thinking about future growth where you may need to add on to this building, the next generation, you could increase the building size by 50% and it would still fit in what would have been the original footprint of the one-story building. We looked at, there's other things that we looked at. As Cord mentioned, they all seem to come out as kind of a wash. We looked at massing, the appearance of the building on site. If you wanted to put this building way out front, like where the annex is now, which we certainly don't want to do, but if you did, you would not want to put a two-story building out there in front of or right next to the existing town hall or the schoolhouse part of the library. But we're not talking about putting it there. An advantage of the two-story is, if it's a gable roof design, is that the gable end is smaller because the footprint is smaller, the end of the building is narrower. So the effect of the gable roof sitting on top of two stories looks more appropriately New England rather than a gable roof with a significant slope on top of a building that's 50 feet or wider than 50 feet on a one-story building. Anything else?
Any other questions? Does anyone know? Whoa, yes. I don't know who was up first, so whoever is better looking can come up first. So.
You're definitely not getting anything next year.
Paul Gazowski, 46 Lamprey Lane. I'm wondering if the committee looked at security issues, the difference between a two-story building and a one-story building in terms of fire and police activity. Recalling that security was a concern early on, so and that might involve the chief, the answer to that.
Did you have a similar question?
No. You want me to mind me answer that?
We, as far as security, for the security features of things like control doors and so forth, in the pricing that we put in originally, the cost by owner have enough costs for the security doors and control that we required. There is certainly if you're looking at what kind of scenarios do you want to be safe from, or what are the scenarios you're concerned about, exiting from a one-story building in a fire is easier than exiting from a two-story building in fire. If it's who's coming into the building, the school department in their new building has made a case for their multi-story building where people coming into the first floor, it takes longer and they can secure people from getting from there to the second floor. Both of these are designed with a lobby which is open to the public. So in the two-story building, there's a lobby on the first floor, and there's a much smaller lobby on the second floor, and the public has access to the lobbies, but not beyond, unless they're buzzed in by the staff. Either staff, the PCB or TC, wouldn't be TC, PCB, or Selectman's office staff. That's the extent that we've looked into it.
Yeah. So in terms of basic thing, the public can get into the public areas, but the staff have, this separate space. I think Corey mentioned before, there's a whole stairway that just the staff have access to. So if somebody comes to the second floor and is complaining because their tax bill is too high, and they start causing alarm, you as staff can actually not buzz them in and just exit, through the door if you need to. There's video surveillance in our prices as well. So we've sat with the chief and he's talked about, the things that he would want us to see put in the building. But there's definitely a segmentation between staff areas and public areas. So. Chief? Yeah.
My two questions, well, not really a question, as far as the elevator, Kirby Corners has a small cabin like we have here. What EMS does is inclines the back and it'll fit right in, so that's a consideration. The other thing is, any consideration being given to reinforcing the floor on the second floor to accommodate the weight of the file cabinets for the town?
Yes.
That was the other thing I was thinking about.
Do you want to respond to the chief?
Yes, the pricing for floor joists on the first floor, which was priced for the storage loads on the first floor for the one-story, are the same pricing that we're using for floor joists for the second floor. And these are quite deep. They're approaching 2 feet deep.
Good size
They're not 2x8s.
Yeah, that's good size joists.
Because in terms of the storage, there's storage for PCB, there's storage for the TCTC, and there's storage for the selectman's office, so. Mr. Brown?
So I want to back up a couple months and ask a question. If originally we had a conversation and there was talk about a two-story with an elevator connected to the parish house, and we turned that off and sent you out on another mission. You did a great job on, but it looks like now we're still looking at a two-story with an elevator, And my question would be, what's the savings and the benefits if we back up and say, let's connect it to the parish house?
We don't know that because you told us not to look into it. I mean, that's the short of
You
it.
took it off the list the last time, so we didn't explore that anymore.
I mean, the benefit of trying to do it is that there's grant money toward the parish house, because the parish house has a magical aspect to it, which is it's historic, and so it qualifies for grants. Whereas a new building doesn't get any grants because it's new and not historic, but
But I was, if I remember right, that I was told that we have a much better chance of obtaining grant money if we tied it to a municipal effort.
yeah, one thing we've discussed is that the parish house could still be used for other purposes, like committee and commission space, in which case you increase your chances of getting an LCHIP grant. And for everyone who's not familiar, the reason that's been stated about that is that LCHIP is hesitant to give grants to things that are just going to go out of business in 5 to 10 years, which has happened all over New England with things like historical societies or museums. So they grant money to a museum, unless you're a museum like the American Independence Museum in Exeter that just got an $80,000 LCHIP grant for a large renovation. They have a track record of being around for decades, and they have large-scale donors. It's not the case here. We don't have donors giving to something like a historical society. So that's why they've said, make it something integral to the town, because they presume if town offices take up a historic building, you're always going to have town offices, whereas the town may not want to have a large historical society, museum, etc. So placing committees and commissions in there would still be an option to the town that's totally independent of the office building. They could be separate functions in separate buildings. And if you're going to use the second story of the parish house for either exact purposes that are on the first floor, in which case there's parity and you can still use that as an office space or something, or you use it as auxiliary storage that only staff have access to, as in you try to comply with the ADA in whatever way that you can there. But it could be used. I think John, no doubt, has further comments.
Well, that part of my spreadsheet is still there, of two-story with basement, connector and parish house. I didn't delete it, but I have not looked at it since you last gave us our instructions. Looking at it now, I should point out again, it's not comparing apples to apples, because when I considered using the parish house, I ended up with even a little bit more unassigned space on the second floor. Part of that was because of the size of the parish house, the rooms that are there, what use are you going to make of them. And it looked like the building with the parish house is more expensive, but that's not factoring in what might be available for grants. But I think the biggest caveat here is I have not looked at that side of the spreadsheet in 2 months.
So,
So for point of clarification, as Corda was just saying, if we go ahead with the two-story building now, let's say it goes to completion, there's no reason why we can't apply for an LCHIP to use the parish house for conferences or something else.
that's true.
That's
So it's like, these things could be independent, they don't have to be tied together at this point.
The thing,
That's correct.
yeah, the thing that we'd have to do, because our hope is that we'll have this discussion and you can give us our direction, because we're waiting for you to tell us where to go next. The second part of this presentation is dealing with the rest of this particular project, the town hall, and dealing with grants and stuff, and what our next steps are, so that you're informed in terms of, this is where we think we should be going, are you okay with that? And so the only thing we have to deal with is in terms of what those steps are, and also in terms of grants, because you do not want to apply for a grant for the parish house at the same time applying for the town hall. So it's a series of, how does this fit into the whole scheme? So, yes, it's possible.
Yeah.
And the LCHIP is the biggest one. There's I don't want to take the court's thunder, but there's a few of them we investigated we're not eligible for, and there's one that we still have to investigate. But LCHIP and Moose Plate are our two biggest Hales in terms of getting money. Loose plates are in $10,000, that particular range. L-chip's up to $500,000. So that's to give you an idea in terms of what those are. But yeah, it's totally possible. But the committee is looking for direction from us. Where do we go next, gentlemen?
Do you know, when L-chip gives out money though, and it's on the order of magnitude of hundreds of thousands, is that more typically land projects?
No, they do buildings too. They do buildings. And it has to be significant for the $500,000. You're more in the $200,000-300,000 range, something like that. But in terms of the parish house, if you double that, because they look for a 50% match.
Sure.
So let's say it's $300,000. I don't think anybody's expecting that thing to be renovated for $600,000. So we're definitely below that. But definitely we have to keep into consideration. It would be my choice to go for the town hall first, parish house second, and then just do that particular thing.
So I
And
think,
you can do other ones in combination with those, but the L-chip won't have to be.
yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, obviously, if we move forward with this, which, well, we're going to move forward, whether it's one or the other. I don't want to abandon town hall. I mean, that has to be continued to work on as well, in the parish house.
Well, you'll see that in the second part
so,
of our presentation, so.
After consideration, my first hit in this is go with the two-story, because there's less impact on the land and everything else, the roof and so forth. So that's my leading at this time.
Mr. Brown?
I think the two-story is the way to go.
All right. I concur.
There's a question.
Oh, gosh, not him again. Mr. Eric?
Question for either you or Cord. When you say the town center has to be connected to the parish house, you mean physically connected or just a town function?
Yeah. Yeah, we had previously talked about physically tethering them together, because then you could make the second floor of the church accessible.
Parish house.
Or the parish house, I'm sorry, the church property accessible. But no, tethered to the town now, we're talking about as separate buildings in the sense that it's an official town function, not a historical society, not a museum. But if you say town committees and commissions, and Lee relies on committees and commissions and has had space for them historically, if that goes there and it's owned by the town and used for town purpose, L-chip is more likely to give the grant.
So my question would be, if you did site it, so that, or whatever the building is, if you sited it within a reasonable distance to the parish house, two things. A, you have to consider the fire potential if one or the other goes. If you connected the second floor with a catwalk, you could use the elevator in the town hall to get to the top floor of the second one and then have a breezeway underneath to go to the first floor. But you'd have it disconnected as far as fire hazard goes. But it would be physically connected, so you might have a better chance of.
That was our initial thing that we were proposing, but the board took that off as a choice.
Well, initially we were proposing
Yes.
an enclosed walkway. I mean, it would
Yeah.
be,
It would be.
They'd be connected by a connector, but not physically, there was like, what, 20 feet, something like that?
a 20-foot connector
Well,
between the
Christ
two.
was 20 feet long.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it would be, like the second floor would be
Yes.
like an enclosed catwalk, you could move back and forth.
Right. Yeah.
So you wouldn't have to worry about ADA.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
Yes, that was the advantage of connecting the two buildings.
Yeah.
Is that then the elevator in the new structure also serves the second floor of the parish house. So it was a way to get use of all of the space on the two floors of the parish house for town office building functions.
There'd be an additional savings of combining their HVAC systems, things like that. But the other thing I should note is that the L-chip schedule, we would have to submit a letter of intent in the spring. That's not decided until June. Tying the municipal office building to an L-chip grant means that you start pushing, when this happens, down the road quite a bit. You're not making plans if it's all contingent upon this grant money. And if the grant money doesn't happen, then your plan of incorporating the parish house just raises the bill on this and makes it sort of unnecessarily complex. So handling them as independent structures would allow the town to move forward with the municipal office building regardless of L-chip, and then either chalk up an L-chip win for the parish house, or say, well, L-chip denied us, we have to think about a different use for the parish house.
You kind of made my argument, I just wanted to restate for clarification. A two-story municipal building, standalone by itself, and then as chairman says, we consider town hall and the parish for parish house for other needs down the road. At least we give, at this point here, it kind of separates it out, we give the townspeople an opportunity to look at the two-story municipal building and then plan it out, let them know, so it's not a big hit all at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, it's undeniable that tying the two of them together would have been a complication.
It's a complication and it's a little bit risk this way here. Maybe the parish house will have a better standing of getting something down the road as a standalone conference meeting room or something along that.
Do we need a motion? Is it suffice that we're all in agreement that it should be a two-story?
Yes,
Does that
We all
suffice?
Seems to be that you're all in agreement.
we're in all agreement.
We're all in agreement.
And you're not
Two-story.
voting to spend any money
Nope.
right now.
Well,
Money.
not right now.
Right
but-
now.
But
Not right now.
the thing I'll reiterate, the next part of this presentation, which is not that long, so don't. We want to outline our expectations of what we think we should be doing next, also to get your, in terms of thoughts, in terms of, is this the right direction? So there's some things that we want to pass by you to make sure you're okay with it, because we're going to come back to you and say, we want to spend some money to do this.
Mhm.
So we want to be upfront in terms of this is what we're thinking.
I've added an additional dozen slides.
No,
Part of it's just my personal journey.
That's
that
all
I'll
right.
share with everyone.
We don't want to quit on this, so we better let them do it.
Yeah, you have to indulge me. All right, so next steps, this is as simplified as we could make things. There will be twin tracks going on at first. The municipal office building, our plans for the municipal office building will be refined, and we'll be collecting further feedback from key stakeholders. We'll also work with cost estimators to refine our plans to minimize the total cost of ownership. When we say total cost of ownership, we mean how much this is going to cost the town over time. So we don't want to be penny wise, pound foolish and build a cheap building that costs a lot to heat or some other trade-off like that. We'll also be refining the cost estimates for the town hall renovations and assessing the state of the parish house. So that's the track on the right. Both buildings are eligible for significant grants for the state and other sources. We'll continue to pursue those grant opportunities and develop a funding schedule. And to speak to Julie's comment earlier, if you look at the 2018 grant awardees from L-CHIP, several of the large dollar figures were town forest projects. Those were $300,000, $400,000 projects. If you look back another year at the 2017 awardees, you'll find a few $100,000 projects. They are rarer. They are things like rehabilitating churches. $300,000 went in 2017, I believe, to a Coptic church, something like that. But those funds are available. Once both of those tracks are complete, the TCVC will be able to provide the information necessary to the select board to develop a warrant article or warrant articles. We'll present those plans to you, and you'll take the next step there. And then once the select board has agreed to an article or articles, the TCVC will work to distribute information to voters.
Any question, Mr. Brown?
I was just wondering if you have a timeline that goes with it.
As soon as humanly possible.
Next thing to develop.
Well, the budget process is going to be ongoing in the fall, and we're going to need something in December, so our plan is to get you something before that, so. But that's just my thoughts.
I mean, my preference would be go faster than we did last year,
Yeah.
so that we have more time to air a plan in front of the public, especially a plan with a price attached to it, because I think that voters got very interested when there was a price attached to things, and were thoroughly disinterested beforehand.
And at least for me,
That's
the
my
last,
private opinion, that's not the opinion of the committee.
that last thing is going to be another one of our hard issues in terms of getting information out. So, we've done this two years in a row in terms of the warrant articles to get money for different things, and it's extremely hard. The last thing we saw in the last vote, it was like a week and a half, people came out of the woodwork. So I think people are just busy, and at some point, they turn their attention to, what's on the warrant article, and that's when they have, all kinds of thoughts and looking for information, so.
To address Mr. Brown's question, two of us on the committee this past week have discussed that we think that we need to put together a schedule. We are meeting Wednesday, and I was going to bring up that we should be working Wednesday on a schedule for all these items, because we need to have that, otherwise it won't get done.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the other thing we've collected in terms of the grants that we talked about, what their grant schedules are. Mr. Bloomquist alluded to a little bit that LCHIP, they look for a letter of intent. So we need to send, this is the project we're looking at, is that something you could fund? They turn around, I think about a month or so, saying, yes, we'll entertain that particular proposal, or no, that doesn't fit our criteria. So we will know at that point, then you submit a real application, which is kind of basically the same thing as you already submitted. But they let you know in the fall. Moose Plate is quarterly, so you find out much quicker. But, sorry, I think I've stolen some of your.
Stole you.
Yeah, I don't know that any of this was particularly thunderous. We will be also seeking grants in the months to come. We've explored these options: USDA, the Community Development Finance Authority, LCHIP, as we talked about before, NHPA, the Moose Plate, and the NH Charitable Foundation. Believe it or not, Lee is too wealthy a community to qualify for either the USDA or CDFA grants. If you don't believe that, we have statistics for you. We are number 16 out of 235 New Hampshire communities in terms of median household income. So we are a relatively well-off community. And Lee has between 17% and 23% low-income or middle-income households. We would need to have 51% or more for a CDFA grant. So that just takes those two options off the table for us. LCHIP and New Hampshire Preservation Alliance will be things that are most proximate in the timeline, and that we can apply for assessment grants from them. New Hampshire Preservation Alliance, I believe, is monthly. We have it all in a spreadsheet. So when we're looking to refine our assessment of the town hall and the parish house, that's money that we can seek out right away, and that will help us refine what those plans would look like. Part of the complication there is it's different than the cost estimating you would get from someone estimating the cost of new construction. You're talking about rehabilitation, renovation, preservation, some mix of those things. The Moose Plate grants are, I believe those are yearly, aren't they, Scott? We talked about the schedule of those. Yeah, we'll be pursuing all those options in the months to come. This is my last slide. It says thank you.
Question pops up. First of all, I think you're on the right path, so I appreciate all the effort that the committee's been doing. Do you have any vision, TCVC, if libraries can be putting anything forward on their own? I'm just wondering if there's a competitive issue out there. I just throw it on the floor for consideration.
I haven't heard anything,
Okay.
but I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, I like the plan where you're gonna go up to town hall first, after you work in the municipal building, plan it, then go up to parish house, again, standing on its own merits.
We need to see the plot layout for where everything's gonna go.
Yeah, but I think it's, that way they stand on their own merits, I think have great opportunity to get funding.
A couple of things. One, we're going to be asking you for money to bring cost estimators back in to look at that particular two-story structure. We want to bring two in. We'll get you prices for those. This is just kind of a heads up. And in terms of, we will be asking for money for doing assessments on the town hall and the parish house. Court alluded to it. These particular people are different than building costs. They do renovations and dealing with old structures. We have I think there's a list of 9 people that do this, or 9 firms in the area that do this. So we're asking for money for those two. And at some point, I think we're way under budget. The last time you gave us $2,000. I think we spent 100 and something out of it. So I guess that's the other thing I would ask if the board would allow us to have, because that was last fiscal year, some money in terms of doing promotion and things like that. So we'll be asking for those things coming forward, so.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Paul. The best looking one in the back row.
Paul Kozlowski, 46 Lamprey Lane. I'm partial to the parish house in that I think it has potential. But I favor a freestanding independent town hall, municipal office building. And I guess my feeling is, I read the minutes from the TCVC, and I think there needs to be clarification from the select board to the TCVC, whether the municipal office building proposed, is it the desire of the select board for that to be freestanding on its own, or to be connected to the parish house? And the reason why I mention that is the moment you connect the two, it opens up the grant opportunities. However, if town hall is the #1 priority, then town hall is the #1 priority. And it would help to clarify that and to put town hall as #1 priority for grant pursuits, not eliminating the parish house from similar things. But I recall quite a while ago I said, it may have been at the deliberative session, that we can't afford to get into a situation where we're competing against each other for limited money. So if the issue is to give a future to the parish house legislatively, then there are ways to do that that would not involve a proposal of linking the municipal office building to the town hall, and create a situation where the energies would be in pursuit of grant money to do the parish house at the expense of the old town hall. So I hope I'm expressing that without injuring any feelings, but that's my concern. I also recall that I think we voted on a piece of legislation last year it was $50,000 earmarked as a capital reserve amount, I think, for the town hall. And the original proposal was $100,000, and Selectman LaCourse suggested we reduce that. And the desire was that that would be seed money. So I fear that the town hall's gotten lost in this discussion, and it needs to really rise to the top. Thank you.
Let me try to answer some of your questions, Paul, at this point. My agreement here with the other two select persons is that it's a standalone municipal building by itself, totally independent. And then the next aspect is to renovate the existing town hall as an independent structure as well. And then finally, the consideration would be, and this would not all be going on at the same time, these are separate, independent. There's no way I want to have competition between 3 different buildings all going on. And we tried to sell a campus, just last year, and it didn't go. So it's going to be an independent run for the municipal building first. I would envision trying to put some money in the warrant for the town hall, the old town hall, so we continue to build funds into that account.
May I ask, Mr. Chair, to see if we can get consensus on what Selectman LaCourse just said?
They already did. They already did all
We
that.
got the message
That
loud and
already
clear.
all happened.
I just would like for, I'm sorry.
The consensus happened
I
too.
do have the floor.
Yes, don't.
It's a standalone municipal building by itself, not connected to anything whatsoever. Hopefully that'll go to the warrant and get passed, and then immediately we'll go after the town hall for renovation. But hopefully in the next warrant as well, we'll put money together towards the town hall to try to build it up, maybe 100,000 or whatever is reasonable at that point, and get that done, then go after the parish house.
Yeah. It's my understanding, Paul, that as well. The municipal office building is not connected to the parish house. That's not what the board asked us to do. It's a separate structure. I concur. I hope that we can put money aside. But one of the things you saw up there in terms of one of the tracks is the assessment on the town hall. We know what it wants to be. We're having somebody come in that does historical restorations. Right now, the number we have is about $398,000 to renovate that particular structure. we wanna bring somebody in and say, okay, yeah, it is 398, or it's 425, or it's 350, whatever it is. At that point, we have that number, and it looks very, very favorable if the town put aside 50,000, hopefully we can put aside 150,000, I don't know, we'll see. But the grantor will look very favorably. Oh, look, they're committed to this project, they haven't given us numbers, and it looks like a success story. They want to be part of a success story. So that would be my vision as well. So yes, the TCBC is not connecting the two structures, the parish house and the municipal office building, two separate things. So, Mr. Brown? Would you
No,
concur?
I concur fully with it. I brought up the issue of the parish house again, only because it was kind of left hanging. You know, they were in a direction where, at one time, where it was gonna be attached to the parish house, and that there were benefits in doing that relative to our eligibility for grant money, et cetera. So I just brought that up again to make sure it was in everybody's thoughts, and that we made a decision. What is the final configuration gonna be? And I agree 100% that it would be a standalone building.
Anything else? I think the board would like to thank the TCBC for their time and efforts.
Absolutely.
It's good work.
They get maybe an extra brownie point this time or something, I don't know what that's for, but, you know.
Someday you could ask for money to serve a meal.
Ooh, wow. You heard it here first. All right. All right, we all set? Item number 6, Tom Dawes, Field District.
All right, the board should have before you grant applications for highway safety.
I don't have to speak to the.
Yes, we did.
That's for traffic enforcement, DUI patrols, speed patrols, things like that.
Any questions, Richie?
This is a grant you're going after, right?
Correct.
Do we have to put anything up?
No, we pay the officers their overtime.
Of course, yeah.
Goes back in.
I think it's good.
Mr. Brown?
Good.
You good?
Yeah.
I move to accept the New Hampshire Highway Safety Patrol grants in the amount of $9,185 and to instruct the finance officer to apply the funds once received to police overtime account. Do I have a second?
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
You got something first to sign with the?
Yeah, do you want to do it with the consent agenda?
Yeah, sure, let's do that. All right. Item number 7, Julie Gomer, Town Administrator.
So you may recall at the last meeting, we talked about the upcoming budget process and discussed whether the board wanted to provide instruction to the department heads as to any possible limitations on what they might put forward. The board put forward somewhat of a tentative 2% cap on the current year's budget. The national average CPI for July, the August numbers haven't come out yet, they're coming out shortly, is 1.7%. The Boston CPI -U urban is 2%, but again, the new numbers haven't come out yet, so who knows what might happen by the time fiscal year 21 budget is in place. But that's what those figures are right now. Another question that's been asked is, there were a few, I'll call them post-budget pay increases that the board approved. Although it's my understanding certainly that any pay increases obviously come out of the fiscal 20 budget. There's not extra money somewhere floating out there. But if a department had a post-budget increase approved, how is the 2% factored? In other words, is the 2% just strictly, it's a 2% increase, again, if you're gonna go forward with the 2%, is it a 2% increase on that department's fiscal 20 budget? Or somehow are any post-approved budgets somehow outside of that?
I I lost you at the last part. Because just in terms of our process, we sat down in December
Yep,
and we went through
Yep.
them and we allocated
Yep.
them out so that when this fiscal year started, Joanne
Yes.
would already have them in, there's no.
correct. But
But-
after that,
Okay, go
the
ahead.
board approved for the police department a couple of pay increases that were after we went through the whole budget process. And then I think either they became effective in fiscal 19 or they became effective at the start of fiscal 20.
And you're asking if the 2% would be,
Well, I guess the question is the 2% still just what was approved through the original budget process?
and not the enhanced
And not
budget?
the, yeah, that's a word for it. The enhanced.
Enhanced.
Well, enhanced, speaking of just that one instance that we're talking about?
That's the only one that comes to mind.
Yeah.
I thought we already dealt with that one, but, no,
No,
we didn't.
Well,
we dealt with it.
it's, again, I mean, obviously, the money has to come out of the current year's budget.
Well, it wasn't very much, you know. think
No,
it's-
I don't think it's a lot.
Just procedural.
Yeah. Okay.
We've gotten the first version of the budget schedule from the ABC, and there's already been, that I'm aware of, one requested change.
I don't like that change, but okay.
I'm just the messenger.
I understand that. I sent it back to the chairperson as well.
Okay.
The public works manager wants to change his date from the 31st to the 17th, where both you and I are not at that particular meeting. So I'm not in favor of that, but if you can make the presentation to us at some other time, I suppose.
Well, I mean, we can, or he can be, he just didn't want to do it on the 31st.
Okay. And I'm not sure if it's a time thing or a day thing. That's why I asked.
It's a
the-
Halloween thing.
What's a Halloween thing? So he's gonna be going out Halloween?
Well, you know,
Well,
he has young children and he wanted to be available.
Well, we could have him at 8 o'clock and he can,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm happy to talk to him and ask him if some other date works. I wasn't aware that there was any issue with the 17th.
Well, the
so.
17th, John, I believe you have planning board. And I have another meeting already. So that's why what's on the 17th was
Yeah.
structured,
Okay.
because, and I wasn't privy to, because Tom had conversations with you to work out this whole,
what I basically
So-
told him at this point, Thursdays are fine, you just gotta work it out with Karen. When I have planning board, I can't be here.
yeah.
So and we don't meet every single week as a planning board, and she has a vision when we're gonna meet normally.
Right.
And if she has those dates, they're fine with me.
But the 17th is one of the dates that she
That's
has.
correct.
that you're-
That is correct.
So that's what the chairman gets the big bucks for, I can deal with
Okay.
it. But I've sent him an email saying that, so.
Okay. But in any event, we have, the schedule's been produced.
Coming together.
Department heads, committees and commissions received it, and, you know, there's usually a few requested changes that come out of it. So that's why I didn't send it to the board, to be quite frank, because it's not the final version. But yes, meetings are proposed for Thursdays.
Mhm.
I believe the first meeting is September 26th, although I almost said TCDC. The ABC has their kickoff meeting on the 12th.
Yeah, this Thursday. And we can drop one of them off. The Conservation Commission isn't asking for money.
Right.
And it's my understanding as well, the Heritage Commission isn't asking for money either, so they can be dropped off as well, so that saves a little time.
So, back to the budget instructions, does the board still want to go forward with letting everyone know, do not increase a budget that is more than 2% of the current year budget? Or do you have?
Yeah. Yes.
So limit their increases to 2%.
Okay. If a department wants to increase their staff, do you want them to find a way to do that within the 2%? Or give the 2% budget and make a pitch for the extra staffing and what the cost will be?
The previous, it's
Make it
within the
work-
budget.
Make it work in the 2%?
But that's my version.
Mr. Brown?
Well, I don't see how you're gonna make it work within the 2% if you roll up all the costs relative to what had.
Sorry.
So, you know, I mean, yeah, you can say that, try and put it inside the 2%. The fallout position's gonna be, hey, here's the impact of where I am in my budget. True. We can talk about it.
Well, again, let's,
I gotta
let's
level the
remember
playing
that
field.
it sounds like we're still putting forward a $2.5 million project, and the school is putting forward a $49 million project.
You've got the new number.
So
So it just levels,
I think the voters are gonna be sensitive
extremely sensitive.
budget increases this year.
Yeah, I agree.
So I'm hearing two different things though. I'm hearing 2%.
2%.
I'm hearing you want some mechanism for that, they're asking for money.
Well, I mean, you know, we can say, hold it, if they can put it inside the 2%, that's what we want. All I'm saying is, they're gonna, you know, if they can't get it inside the 2%, they're gonna come up and tell us what the impact of being held to just a 2% budget is gonna do. I mean, that's a fact, that's how you do it. You go up to present your budget and you say, okay, this is all you gave me, here's what I can do for what you gave me, here's what I'm not gonna be able to do.
Well,
It is.
that's exactly right.
Clear enough for you?
So 2%. 2% is 2%, you make it work.
So if they want a new person,
Right.
let's say you want a new person to, you know, whatever, what are you not gonna do?
Yeah.
Or what can you not fit in your
But you
budget?
have to fill that 435 square feet.
I figured that.
445 square feet.
445.
We're gonna put a Starbucks.
Well, just because it's on your floor, your proposed floor, doesn't mean it's your
Oh, my
space.
God.
All right, I will instruct everybody. Thank you. Now, any other discussions relative to budget?
Well, as the process goes on, we'll have to discuss in terms of salary increase pools and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But, no, but if you can have all the, I think you've got the budget things in terms of the things to hand out for the ABC, the little booklets that you usually
Yeah, we're
have.
still waiting for some notebooks to come back. We always struggle with
I
this.
bought mine back.
You
I
bought
did.
mine back?
That was 2 years ago.
Yes,
Yeah.
well, you didn't have one. You brought yours back.
Yes, I did.
You did not.
Uh-oh, uh-oh.
Boy, Denise, that was pretty direct. And you did it publicly,
You
too.
did, you did.
What didn't I do?
See, the three-wing binder? What's
The
that?
3-ring binder, the budget notebooks that we handed every year, we asked for them back so we can reuse
I
them.
gave mine back.
They have people's names on them and.
That's right.
Okay, well, we'll look again.
Maybe we could spend the $3 and just.
I gave mine.
Last
back.
year you did.
Said Terry Brown right on the top of it, front page.
Point of order.
But I'll look again when I go.
Okay, you do that.
Can we move on?
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
So, I don't know whether the board recalls, I think it was in March of May of 2018, when a request came through for someone who wanted to use the pavilion on a weekend to be able to use the electricity. We had a discussion at the time, and so now, and since that time, to the best of my knowledge, no one has requested it again, except for now. So somebody wants to use the pavilion on September 28th, which is a Saturday. And here's the issue, as it was the last time we talked about it. We would have to, you know, pay an employee to go turn the electricity on, because
It's on a timer, so shut off.
it's on a timer, so it would shut off by itself, but we would have to pay a 2-hour minimum, it's a call out, to an employee to turn the power on. So, do we want to do that, or do we simply just want to tell people, we're sorry, we don't provide power for,
This is for the pavilion, they want power for the pavilion, so they'd be using the outlets in the pavilion, so there's no,
I think they would probably be using the outlet that's on the post, because we can separate it, we can turn everything else off.
so what's a 2-hour minimum for whoever is going?
$50.
Jeez, I wanna work for the town.
Well, you know, when by the time you factor everything in.
I'm not so enthusiastic about it, we're just opening up a possibility of a flurry of activity. So I'm not enthusiastic.
Mr. Brown?
It's a park. If certainly, I think if somebody is willing to pay a fee for us to turn on a switch and charge X amount for electricity, then I think we should be able to offer that and turn it off again. Well, it turns off automatically.
Turns out automatically.
Well, I wasn't even factoring in the cost of the electricity, which I'm assuming is going to be negligible.
Oh,
It's all LED lighting anyway, so it's pretty cheap lighting.
Well, we don't know what they're gonna be using it
That's
for.
true.
It's just, it's getting the power turned on.
I think it's something we can offer, you know.
Well, what would we charge them?
We weren't talking about charging.
For the electricity, no.
No.
No, I
We weren't
was
talking
just,
about charging at all.
I wasn't talking about
I
charging at
didn't think you
all.
were at all, so we'll have to eat the cost, is what I'm saying.
Well, okay, but I'm saying, go ahead and charge a fee for it.
Mm.
I don't think we're ready for that yet. We haven't discussed that.
I also suspect that the person would say, no, thank you.
Mhm.
I mean, it's just a, it's a birthday party, I think.
I don't think the town should be, if they want to use the pavilion, it's fine, but I don't think we should be at the mercy. When anybody wants to go down and use electricity, we run down there and turn the switch on.
I think that's a little dramatic. I don't see we're at anybody's mercy. They could call and schedule it, and we could send somebody down there to be sure the power's on for that period of time.
Well, would we charge them if we didn't? $25?
I'm sorry?
Would we charge them to turn it on, $25?
Yeah. There's a $25 fee, usage fee for the park.
Again, just my estimation is that won't pay for the 2 hours. I mean, it's gonna take the employee 30 seconds to turn the power on.
I don't know, I'm
but-
just, if you're gonna charge something, you have to figure out what it is.
Right,
Well, it has to be the cost of the person to run down
right.
there.
That's why I'm saying 2 hours, because it's
So
gotta
it's
be a
gotta be
2-hour
$50,
minimum.
right?
So it's $50.
It's something maybe the rec commission would do, and then the money would go into their account, maybe? I don't know. I'm kind of in between the two of you. I don't wanna say no, but I don't wanna, and it's only once.
The alternative is,
If you want to say no, say no.
put it on a volunteer, and I don't know that we would get anybody, and so.
Give the volunteer the money.
I mean, the fact is, they could go there with their own little generator.
They certainly
and,
can, yeah.
Well,
you know.
do we allow machines or generators in the park? I don't.
I don't know that we have a restriction.
We don't
I
have any
know that it's
restriction.
come up. This is almost exactly the conversation I mean, it's.
It was the same, I
had
think we
last
had the
time.
same discussion and the same votes last time, so I'm a no, so.
Mr. Brown, are you a no?
Fine, no.
John, answers no. Uh-oh.
Did you all just vote no?
They all just voted down.
Done.
Do you have some comment to make,
We-
Mr.
Well, I'm-
Santel?
Something to
Well,
think
John,
about.
he was saying, he was gonna sit down.
Just
Like a shooting gun.
would you want to make a motion to not reconsider real quick before I say anything?
No.
The other thing to think about, instead of sending an employee down there, would be just to buy a timer, 24-hour timer, that you could, whoever's down there doing the other work could set it for Tuesday
other
at
work?
3 p.m. to 6 p.m. And you can, I mean, we do that all the time with other types of facilities, so you can buy that ITT box for $50, and
I got a,
somebody's just gotta set it.
I got a better idea. What we could do is put a box down there and they can take dollar bills and put it in, and you buy electricity.
You can't do that.
I know you can, so, $5, $10,
Just as with
$25,
Like when you had
$50.
to
Just
buy
as
the
with a
gas
car
in your
charger.
apartment, you had to pay the guy.
With an electric car charger, just exactly the
Same
same
Well-
thing. All it does is turn it on.
This is a consideration of the board. I mean, this is an opportunity, makes
Fine with me. I just think they ought to have access to the park.
They have
If
access
they
to
need
the
power, if they need power, there's power sitting on a pole there, we ought to figure out
It
a
is
way
gonna
to
be
get it.
frustrating to see 3,000 outlets and not be able to use one of them.
That's the way it is.
Didn't you just vote no?
We both know.
We did vote no.
But it was good thought. I'm kind of warming up to the pay-as-you-go routine, a little machine down there, you put the monies in like we do for,
It's a no.
Maybe we should see if we can ask Jim Banks he has some ideas. He's
Yeah.
an electrical person.
Yeah.
See if he has some ideas in terms of doing something that, you know, is pay-as-you-go or something. And we
Actually,
don't
I'm
have to
kind
worry
of
about it.
serious about it, I think it'd be kind of neat.
So, we had to vote to no,
Correct.
but can we direct the town administrator to ask Mr. Banks and or others
Yeah.
if there's a way to put pay-as-you-go electricity out of the park?
Yeah, I like that idea.
It feels so retro.
It is retro.
Retro?
Well,
No, again, you know, I read books.
if there's a need, it'll,
People
the only
used to
problem
have to-
is, at some point,
Coins
Joanne or
and
somebody's gonna have to
gas.
go and collect the money, so.
Or in the shower.
And the other opportunity is a machine to drop out charcoal briquettes, you can buy them at a buck each.
Credit card only.
No, absolutely not.
Causes other problems.
That's a
Mr.
whole
Chairman, I'm
other-
letting it go.
Are you done?
I'm done, Mr.
All
Chairman.
right, well, anything more?
Thank you.
You all set?
Yep.
All right, I move to accept the consent agenda as presented. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, we'll sign our lips away now.
Is this going public still a vote?
Yeah, I want to talk.
It was a non-meeting. Oh, the non-public.
And I'm public.
Yeah, call back. What takes that so long?
I gave her 16, I thought you said it, the case was 16.
Oh, I thought it was, what is it?
It says 18.
Oh, okay.
On
That was your chairman's discount. but
the-
If it says, which whatever you put on there.
That's what it says.
All right, all right.
And just let them pay the guy down.
Oh, come on. What is this?
Messed it up.
No, it's like,
Oh, 1,000 little initials.
yeah, the 1,000 little initials, but it starts halfway through, so
You have to sign,
I,
okay.
I did that, but then, and I'm thinking, I thought there was little initials, but then
There
it didn't
was.
start until later on. Oh, my goodness.
You're ready.
Bring it on, bring it on.
Bring it on. No place for us to sign.
You get the initials afterwards.
Show them to sign this again. Let's just pass it.
So it's, and this Primex one is just me on the first one, right?
Correct.
Yeah, put Denise worried about it. Okay. Here we go.
Yep, no, all those are done. anything to do with that one. Sign up. The last page. And you don't have to do that one.
No signature. That's already done, it just needs Scott. This is just Scott's one.
You good?
Good.
Number 9, move to enter non-public session, New Hampshire RSA 91-A:3, Roman numeral 2A. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Brown, any discussion? No discussion. Mr. Brown, yay or nay?
Yay.
Mr. LaCourse?
Yay.
Mr. Bugby, yay. Motion passes.
We
Oh, wait a minute.
people and taking reservations, that's the first word that came to mind.
Okay.
Come up to the podium,
And what date is it?
December 5th.
December 5th.
Put me on there, Denise.
Okay.
Me and Carolyn.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Chairman, you can have the floor now.
Thank you. Item number 10, move to seal the non-public meeting minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Oh, it's hard to. Mr. Brown? Are you in favor of sealing the minutes? Yes?
Aye.
Mr. LaCourse?
Yay.
Mr. Bugby?
Aye,
Yes.
I'm in favor.
Motion passes. Item number 11. Anything from anybody?
No.
No, I have a thing I would like to discuss dealing with Little River Park. There is a trail that goes out of the back of Little River Park. It goes through a piece of land that the town owns that has an easement on it. And it goes through Mr. Wolf's property and terminates on Lee Hill Road. The two chiefs that Karen and I walked to today, there's a couple of places the fire chief has a concern. One with a steep bank, they want to see some kind of guardrail system or something, and kind of almost opposite that, there's some juicy places where there's a lot of water. He'd like to see that dealt with. We'd have to open it up a little bit, but the thought is to have a separate way to get in and out of the river park in case there's an incident. Also in terms of for emergency vehicles. And also it'd be nice to stop what happened, which I experienced on Saturday, traffic coming and going in that little enclosed space just as you come in the gate. And also in terms of people running back and forth in front of cars and stuff, it's just not safe. So the thought is to explore that. So we did a site walk today. Fortunately or unfortunately, probably fortunately, Bill Hum learned about this and he told Karen that there's an easement on part of that property. So my question to the board is, one, would you like to pursue this? And two, can we ask Karen Rossi to see if the easement holders, I think it's Stratford County, something or other, if they would be receptive to a proposal from the town to put in a road through there. There's already like a path that a snowmobile is already using, so.
Was Karen able to determine whether it is in fact the right-of-way that's granted by the deed on the property?
There's a right-of-way over the Wolf's property to get there, but the problem is, that's not the problem, because Mr. Wolf,
No, not Mr. Wolf's property, the town's property.
there's an easement.
Had, no,
Conservation
separate from the
easement?
conservation easement, there's a right-of-way.
Oh, unless, well, I didn't want her to do anything.
Right.
We wanted to see if the board's not interested in doing it, there's no sense having her, spend time.
No, I
don't know.
actually think it's a wise move. I saw the bottleneck, because I had to deal with that particular issue, and the opportunity to have another way out in case there's a fire or some other issue that happens, it's worth exploring at this time. So I'd like to move forward. I'm going to make the suggestion that obviously Conservation Commission's involved if we're going to cut a road, and the Recreation Commission because they're in charge of recreation.
Mr. Brown?
It's absolutely the right thing to do. We know what it was like trying to, just when we were early in the fair proceedings, we were jammed up on the driveway for a long time. So, no, we definitely could use a second entrance and exit in there.
So can we ask the town administrator to work with Karen to see what the issue is in terms of maybe the easement allows for it? She's gonna check.
Yeah, I read the easement today, because this all came up this afternoon, and it depends on how you read it.
Also depends on terms of who holds the easement, how they're gonna interpret that.
Right, but again, if it is the right-of-way that's granted by deed,
Mhm.
I don't know that the easement supersedes the right-of-way.
I see.
So,
Well, it sounds like something needs to be worked out either way. The other thing that Karen and I spoke about, which I believe the Fair Committee is going to address a little bit, but another thing just to put in our thinking caps on, they have a problem in terms of people who are exhibitors or working at the fair parking in the parking lot that's by North River Road. So getting them to park in the back would alleviate spaces, but the police chief told me his officer counted more than 50 cars on North River Road. So the parking lot is full and they're parking out there anyway. So we've created a very successful event, but we've not created parking to allow those people to participate. So one of the things that she said to me is she would be interested if the board would be supportive of trying to expand that parking lot, either to the north or to the south a little bit. And I think that's something we look in. We have that cellar hole that we can't, but maybe we can dig into the bank a little bit. Maybe we can go a little bit south. I don't know if the board's interested in pursuing that, but I think that would be helpful as well. So unless we want to turn the fair into something that nobody shows up to, and then we
No,
don't
I
have fair
think
parking.
it's a wise one. I remember we had discussed with Randy Stevens, the highway director at the time, about expanding it off there as you come to the parking lot to the left. So we had those thoughts to begin with, and I'd like us to
we did
expand.
expand, didn't we?
We did, I
expand.
think we picked up like, 16 spaces or something like that.
Yeah.
But yes, if we can expand it even more. And explain to me again, we have no rights in that cellar hole? Town owns the land.
I don't know. I'd have
Did
to
you
go
look at
back.
that
I
again?
haven't talked about that or looked into it.
You know, it's one thing if it's a building, but it's a pit.
It's something to do with the state. The state.
Right, the
so-
state
know
has
that.
some,
We have something from the state reference in
do.
it. The lady that's in charge of it was
Right.
pretty
Yes,
adamant
that's
that.
I think the restrictions relative to the cellar hole were tied to getting the state and federal money. Because it has to go through historical review at the state level. And I think that was a condition of being able to get them funding.
So if you can explore that and then get back to us,
Mm-hmm.
that
That
would
was
be
a
great.
couple of years ago.
Yeah, it was, I remember it. But, you know, I also remember there was a discussion and somehow that we could have just flattened it and taken it away and built. But we decided to go the other way. But it's worth looking at this point. And I'm all for keeping historical properties, but at the same time, if it prevents us from providing a safe parking space getting people off the road, because I was walking the road, the cars going back and forth, and zooming, they go pretty fast on that road. And I'd
Well, the
say,
thought would be to keep, because we start at 10, so maybe like by 9:30, that gate is totally shut off.
yes, exactly.
And then any traffic from people going in and out, because some people that volunteer, they have to go out and whatever, they could go out another way. Because it gets dangerous. I'm
Absolutely.
just fearful some little kid's gonna get crushed and we're gonna be responsible and we're all gonna feel bad. So if we do something to
I think
forestall
it's
that, so.
both things, the road, egress, and the other one.
Oh, there's gotta be a way of doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, anything else, gentlemen?
No, that's it for me. I'm good.
I'll be thinking about your volunteers of the year. Have we done any submissions yet?
Just one.
Is it me?
We can't say.
We can't say.
It's secretive. Oh my goodness.
You're not a volunteer. Oh, you're a kind of weird volunteer.
I'm a weird volunteer, that's for sure.
Elected and volunteer.
Yes, very weird.
I will be out of the office from next Wednesday, probably
Next
through,
week.
isn't it? Next, wait.
Oh my
Is it?
gosh.
Yes,
Wait a minute, it is
Oh my
next week.
God.
Next Wednesday, probably to the following Monday,
Mhm.
so.
Okay. It's in good hands with Denise.
So they're creating the budget stuff, not the budget stuff, the packet, the manifest and all of this stuff? Because you won't be here for that, right?
Well, I typically
Is
don't
it-
do the manifest.
Well, I thought you checked everything.
Yeah, yeah,
The night of the meeting.
yeah,
Oh, the night.
The day of the meeting, yeah.
yeah,
She'll be back then.
Um,
maybe.
The other thing is, I
Depends on
shared
what it
with the supervisor of the checklist and with the town administrator the condition of our moderator.
Yeah.
So she has purchased a house in Michigan.
Hmm.
She is living there. Her domicile is still Lee.
Oh,
So she's told me that she's going to decide in the month, this particular month, if she's going to be staying in Michigan or moving back here with her mother. I think it kind of depends on her mother's house sale. If her mother's house sells, they'll probably move to Michigan. If it doesn't, she's gonna come back here. But she'll let us know. I did have a conversation with Don Quigley if he's interested. He said he would do it in an interim basis. But that would give us coverage.
yes.
If he's, well, they can put whoever they want, but he's interested. So just kind of, that concerns me that we don't have a moderator, or would not have a moderator, but we still do until she resigns, so. That's it. Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.